they're essential businesses. Talk to us a little bit about what you're hearing from your customers and what recommendations you have.
Yeah, thank you. I think, so I get to see what's going on with, almost 2,000 customers across the Midwest, but also dealing with, the fact that we have several hundred of our own employees. And so I'm dealing with our own internal employees with a couple hundred of them working from home. If I had to just boil down what I feel like, I'll use Dr. Raymond's, if we're in the first or second inning, I'm going to be optimistic and say the second inning. But I feel like this week, what's really hit home for me is that communication continues to just be paramount. I actually applaud this group for being ahead of communicating often and communicating as much as we know. But what I mean by that is, our own employees and the folks that are working for all of you on this call, they're dealing with, I think, a range of emotions right now that we actually don't know what to deal with. So if you just kind of put yourself in your own shoes, you're dealing with what's happening as you process information. But I know at my household, I'm working like crazy. My wife happens to be in the medical field. She's working like crazy. I now have kids at home that are sitting at home trying to be in school, but they're really not. And then you actually have this collision, so to speak, of what's going on in the news, what's going on in social media. And when you combine all those things together, we are starting to see people react, what I'd say, in an emotional way. And I mean that at all levels of organizations. We have CEOs that are trying to balance being empathetic with being an essential business, and how do we actually keep all the gears in place. We have, as the CARE Act continues to come to fruition, we have balancing the fact that we need to make sure that we have our essential employees doing everything they can and balancing their own health. We also have, some things that have popped up on our end, believe it or not, is, we've had several emails this week from good employees saying, I think I'm going to end up making as much money on unemployment, so I'm going to see if I can go that route. When you put all those things together, I'll probably just go back to the main thing I talked about that says communication continues to be the most important thing. Now, to communicate, obviously, you have to have good information. I will say that I think all of us are working hard to be better employers, better at using information and data. And I've actually been impressed with the level of information that both state and local, as well as folks like the MMAC, are providing to employers like us and helping band together to create the best information. But again, we have our own employees that we are sealing, and there's just this range of emotion that we have to manage. So I think the good news is I feel like there's a playbook that we are all getting better at. I think the challenging news that we're all trying to figure out is, to Dr. Raymond's point, this is the first or second inning, and the fatigue mentally that I feel like is starting to hit some people is pretty high. So from our standpoint, we're trying to just keep information front and center and communicate as often as possible, as frequently as we can with the information that they need to know. But it's challenging for sure, but looking forward to leading through this with all the leaders around here.
Great. Ryan, what advice would you have for employers, especially as we discussed the trying to stay connected? So people who are not in an essential business or are in a position where they can work from home are now really striving to stay connected, and there's a fear of not being responsive. And so how do you talk to employers about managing that?
Yeah, I think this goes to, this earlier conversation of the emotional impact that everyone's having. And, I think yesterday was a big one for, my previous employer. And, I feel bad for what all retailers are going through right now. But when you read that in one day, 500,000 people in the retail industry are laid off, so to speak, or furloughed, paranoia starts to set in. And this, I'm supposed to be working really hard and doing everything that I can to contribute. And I feel like just being okay with the fact that is a real emotion. I think as leaders and folks that are actually managing folks, we have to make sure that we are putting our people at ease and really measuring what matters and not FaceTime. And it's really easy to do, right? Now that we're all so connected, we feel like we should have everything at our fingertips. What I told one of our customers yesterday was, an hour feels like a week feels like a month, and a month feels like an eternity. And so there's this cautiousness of sometimes you do have to go slow to go fast, because activity doesn't equal productivity.
Yeah, and as companies deal with the financial challenges here, how do you keep from feeling like you have an A team and a B team when you've got to furlough a part of your team as a result of the impact of the financial ramifications of this?
Yeah. So I think everyone's dealing with this choppiness, just like you mentioned, of this A team and B team. But at the end of this, I feel like we do have this obligation. Fiduciary obviously is running companies. We also have an obligation to our community, and so again, balancing these things is important. And again, I'm going to go back to the word communication. We've had to make some decisions on our end as well that are challenging. And when I explain the why, you get a better response than I think typically you realize. But if people aren't thinking about the challenging news of what could impact them, I think we're kidding ourselves. I don't care what industry that you're in right now, there is some ramification or unintended consequence that you could be dealing with. And so actually just being very upfront about here are the things that we're dealing with, here's how we're going to communicate, this is what phase 1 or 2 or 3 could look like if we had to make some tough decisions. It allows people to process in their own way, in their own space, on their own time. And in the absence of communication, people create their own stories, and I'm always a fan of creating your own narrative.
Good. Chris, do we have questions from the audience at all?
Yeah, we had one question for Dr. Raymond. Dr. Raymond, could you discuss the medical benefit of the self-isolation centers the state announced this week?
I don't have enough information to say, but I would also say that for people that can't effectively isolate at home, perhaps they don't have the social or financial support system, these could be a godsend for all of us. So I'd like to know more information, but I think in theory it's good. It's a good idea.
And another question for Dr. Raymond. Is our lousy weather so far helping with our social distancing?
Good question. I think for our mental health, though, it would be nice to get out for a walk as long as we protect our personal space bubble.
And then one potential question for Ryan. Ryan, for employees of nonprofits that are religiously affiliated that may not be eligible for traditional unemployment insurance, is there any carve out for them in the CARES Act as far as you know?
Yeah, I wish I had the answer to that one, and I don't. I happen to serve on a not-for-profit board, and I know what they're doing, but it's outside of the stimulus package, so to speak. Be happy to look into that and provide help to someone if you want to put me in touch with them. But yeah, I'm probably not the expert on the not-for-profit side.
Great, thank you. And then for Dr. Raymond, we had another question about masks, specifically the homemade ones that are out there. I know there's probably all kinds of different designs out there, but in general, how effective are they and what uses might they have?
Hard question to answer. First of all, there's a lot of variability in the materials used in the masks. But what I would say at a minimum, if it makes you feel better or it sends a message to people around you that you're serious about social isolation, that's a good thing. We don't even know, honestly, whether surgical masks protect you from either giving or getting an infection out in the public. We know they work in hospitals, but more and more I'm starting to believe that we should be wearing masks if we have them when we leave our house. So I think it's probably ultimately a good thing.
All right, and that's all we have in terms of audience questions.
Good, and maybe one more for me for Dr. Raymond. As we look at our neighboring states, do you get a sense that we're on the same page when it comes to social distancing and what we're doing so that people moving between these borders are coming kind of with the same conditions?
I'm actually concerned about that, Tim. I think we're all doing the same things, started at different times. And, it looks like we're behind, which is a good thing, behind Illinois. But we really need to watch to see how they're doing in terms of bending down their curve. If they don't flatten the curve, it's going to make it harder for us to flatten our curve.
Good. Well, Dr. Raymond, Ryan, thank you very much for your time today. We'll be back tomorrow with the next episode, and hopefully we continue the cautiously optimistic trend. So thanks very much for your questions, and join us tomorrow at 3:30. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.